There is a memorable quote in Geopolitics that should never be forgotten. It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. Henry Kissinger spoke those words decades ago, and they've never felt more prophetic than they do right now. Again, an example coming from the European Union. A celebration about what might be one of the most economically devastating trade deal in modern history. What we witnessed this week wasn't just another Trump trade announcement. This was a masterclass in how modern imperialism operates, how a declining hegemon extracts tribute from its vassals, and how the fiction of partnership masks the reality of economic colonization. The European Union just agreed to pay $600 billion for the privilege of remaining America's friend, and they're calling it a victory. Let me break down exactly what happened, because the mainstream coverage has been, shall we say, creatively edited. Trump announced a comprehensive deal with the European Union that the media is spinning as a win-win partnership. The reality is far more sinister. The numbers tell a story that should terrify anyone who cares about European sovereignty or global economic justice. The centerpiece of this deal is Europe's commitment to purchase $750 billion in American energy over the next 3 years. That's $250 billion per year. Now, to understand just how massive this is, consider that in 2024, America's liquefied natural gas exports to Europe totaled only $13 billion. When you add oil exports of $57 billion from 2023, you're looking at total energy exports of around $70 billion annually. So we're going from $70 billion to $250 billion per year. That's not growth, that's economic colonization. Europe is agreeing to pay more than 3.5 times what they currently pay for energy. And they're doing it to serve American geopolitical interests, not European energy security. But the energy extortion is just the beginning. European Union also committed to $600 billion in direct investments in the United States. This isn't mutual investment. This isn't partnership. This is tribute payment, pure and simple. Europe is literally paying America for the privilege of trading with America. In return for this massive wealth transfer, what does Europe get? Trump graciously agreed to lower his threatened tariffs from 30% to 15% on most European goods. Think about that for a moment. Europe pays $600 billion up front, commits to overpaying for American energy by hundreds of billions more, and in return, they get the privilege of only being taxed at 15% instead of 30% on their own exports. This is what Kissinger meant when he said American friendship is fatal. The European Union is paying an astronomical price to remain in America's sphere of influence, and that price is only going to increase as American desperation grows. Let's look at the tariff structure more closely, because it reveals the sophisticated nature of this economic domination. Most European goods will face that 15% tariff, but certain products get zero tariffs. Which products? Aircraft components, certain chemicals, generic pharmaceuticals, and semiconductor equipment, notably including ASML products from the Netherlands. Notice the pattern? Exceptions benefit specific American strategic interests. ASML makes the machines that manufacture computer chips, machines that American companies desperately need. So while European automakers get hammered with 15% tariffs, the Dutch company that makes equipment America needs gets a free pass. This isn't trade policy. It's strategic resource extraction. The European Commission president tried to spin this as a victory, claiming they negotiated the best deal possible under the circumstances. But listen to what she actually said. We did the best we could. We couldn't get any lower, but we don't want to go to 30% tariffs on everything. This is the language of a vassal state accepting the best terms the imperial power is willing to offer. She also acknowledged that these tariffs will hurt European companies and consumers, but claimed it's better than the alternative of even higher tariffs. This is classic extortion logic. Pay the protection money, or something worse might happen to your business. The energy component of this deal reveals the true geopolitical game being played. Trump's team explicitly stated that this massive energy purchase is designed to help Europe wean itself off Russian gas. But Russian gas was cheap and reliable. American shale gas is expensive and comes with strings attached. Europe is being forced to abandon affordable energy from Russia to buy expensive energy from America. And they're calling it energy security. This is economic warfare disguised as partnership. The United States is using its market power and tariff threats to force Europe into energy dependency. and Europe is paying handsomely for the privilege. European consumers will face higher energy costs, European businesses will struggle with increased input costs, and European governments will face fiscal pressure from the $600 billion investment commitment. But here's what the mainstream analysis won't tell you. This aggressive behavior is actually a sign of American weakness. It's not strength. A truly dominant power doesn't need to extort its allies. It can offer genuine mutual benefits, because its economic superiority is unquestioned. The fact that America is resorting to tariff, blackmail, and tribute extraction reveals a deeper truth about the current global order. We're witnessing the behavior of a declining hegemon. Historically, rising powers challenge established ones through competitive advantage, technological innovation, and superior economic models. But what we're seeing now is different. We're seeing an established power that can no longer compete on merit alone. So it's using political and economic coercion to maintain its position. The United States can no longer offer Europe a better deal than Russia on energy. So it uses sanctions and tariff threats to force Europe to buy American. American manufacturers can no longer compete with Chinese efficiency and innovation. So the government uses tariffs and trade wars to protect domestic industries. American financial institutions can no longer maintain global dominance through superior service. So the government weaponizes the dollar and the SWIFT system to maintain control. This is the behavior of an empire in decline, desperately trying to maintain control through increasingly coercive means. And the cost of this coercion is being paid by America's supposed allies. The European Union isn't the only victim of this dynamic. Japan is being pressured into $550 billion in American investments, though Japanese officials are notably less enthusiastic about the terms than their European counterparts. Other allies are being forced to choose between economic sovereignty and American protection, a choice that becomes starker with each passing trade deal. But empires in decline face a fundamental problem. The more aggressively they extract from their periphery, the more they incentivize the creation of alternatives. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the rise of BRICS and the broader Global South movement. While Europe is celebrating its expensive friendship with America, much of the world is building something different. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, recently expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia. This isn't just an economic alliance. It's a civilizational project offering an alternative to Western-dominated institutions. What makes BRICS different from the American model? Let's start with how they approach trade relationships. When China builds infrastructure in Africa or Asia, they don't demand tribute payments or impose punitive tariffs. When Russia supplies energy to friendly nations, they don't use it as a tool of political coercion. When India shares technology with developing countries, they don't structure the deals to create dependency. This doesn't mean BRICS nations are altruistic. They're pursuing their own interests, just like every other country. But they're doing it through what they call win-win cooperation, rather than zero-sum extraction. They're building productive capacity in their partner countries, rather than just extracting wealth. They're offering infrastructure investment rather than military bases. They're promoting technological cooperation rather than enforcing technological dependency. The numbers tell the story. South-South trade, meaning trade between developing countries, has been growing faster than North-South trade for over a decade. Alternative payment systems that bypass the dollar-dominated SWIFT network are gaining adoption rapidly. Dollarization efforts are accelerating as countries realize that holding dollar reserves means holding assets that can be frozen or seized at America's discretion. The Global South is watching this European Union trade deal very carefully. They're seeing what partnership with America really means in practice. They're seeing a developed, sophisticated economic bloc, like the European Union, being forced to pay tribute for the privilege of trading with America. They're choosing differently. This isn't happening by accident. The very aggression that America is showing toward its allies is accelerating the creation of alternatives. Every time the United States weaponizes trade, more countries look for ways to reduce their dependence on American markets. Every time Washington freezes foreign assets, more nations move their reserves out of dollar-denominated instruments. Every time America demands tribute from its allies, or countries consider whether the cost of American friendship is worth paying. The European Union deal might look like a victory for Trump's negotiating strategy. But from a historical perspective, it might be remembered as the moment when American overreach became too obvious to ignore. Europe is paying an enormous price to remain in America's orbit, and that price is only going to increase as American economic desperation grows. But the economic costs are just the beginning. This deal locks Europe into a subordinate position in global affairs. European foreign policy will increasingly align with American interests. Not because Europeans choose it, but because their economic dependency makes independence impossible. European technology companies will find themselves cut off from Chinese markets and supply chains, not because it serves European interests, but because American policy demands it. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is building institutions that offer genuine alternatives. The BRICS Development Bank is funding infrastructure projects without the political conditions imposed by Western institutions. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is creating security arrangements that don't require hosting American military bases. Various bilateral and multilateral trade agreements are reducing dependence on dollar-denominated transactions. We're not just witnessing a shift in economic relationships, we're witnessing the emergence of a multipolar world order. The question isn't whether this change will happen, it's whether it will be peaceful or chaotic, managed or catastrophic. The European Union deal suggests that America's strategy is to lock in as many dependencies as possible before alternatives become too attractive. But this approach has a fundamental flaw. It makes American friendship so obviously costly that even the most compliant allies begin to question the relationship. History doesn't move in straight lines, and declining empires rarely manage their decline gracefully. The Roman Empire increased extraction from its provinces as its core weakened, ultimately accelerating the very fragmentation it was trying to prevent. The British Empire fought 2 world wars to maintain its global position, ultimately bankrupting itself in the process. America might avoid this fate if it can transition from imperial dominance to cooperative leadership. But deals like this European agreement suggest that American elites are choosing extraction over cooperation, coercion over partnership. What does this mean for ordinary people watching these developments unfold? If you're European, expect higher costs for energy, transportation, and consumer goods. Expect your governments to have less room for independent policymaking. Expect increasing political tensions as the costs of American friendship become impossible to ignore. If you're American, understand that this wealth extraction is temporary. The tribute flowing in from Europe and other allies might boost short-term economic indicators, but it's creating long-term enemies and accelerating the creation of alternative systems. When those alternatives become fully operational, America will find itself increasingly isolated in a multipolar world. If you're watching from anywhere else in the world, pay attention to the choice being offered. You can join the American system and pay the price that Europe is paying. Or you can help build the alternatives that are emerging through BRICS and other institutions. The European Union trade deal isn't just about tariffs and energy purchases. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want a world where the strong extract tribute from the weak? Where friendship means subordination? Where economic cooperation comes with political strings attached? Or do we want a world where countries can cooperate as equals, where trade benefits all parties, where sovereignty is respected rather than purchased? Henry Kissinger's observation about American friendship being fatal wasn't meant as a criticism. It was simply a recognition of how imperial power works. But empires don't last forever. The very behaviors that maintain imperial control in the short term often accelerate imperial decline in the long term. The age of unchallenged American hegemony is ending. Not because America's enemies defeated it, but because America's friends finally calculated the true cost of American friendship. And they're starting to wonder if there might be a better way. If this analysis helped to clarify the question, don't forget to like the video and subscribe the channel to keep thinking the world how it really is.